So I think some people, I mean, this is very interesting, and just kind of a sensational example. It gets people's attention. But I think some people may say, well, this is a few dozen people who actually killed themselves. This is a small group, a few hundred people. Why study it? What's the value in understanding this?
A couple of answers to that. One is, even though it's a small group, it's a group which did something radical, which did something intentional, and the response to it was such that it demands our attention. Immediately after the suicides occurred, Ted Turner, who was CNN's founder and owner at the time, came out and said, "Well, it's a good way to get rid of a few nuts." Mm-hmm. And by and large, the treatment from the media was basically to make fun of these people, was to say, well, they were crazy, they were deluded. Newsweek had an article where they said that basically that they believed in nonsense, that it was a bunch of mishmashed, nonsensical theology. If about 40 people or so, and by the end there were 39 members who committed suicide, and there were a few sort of ex-members who decided later on to commit suicide as well. So you have about 40 people or so. If 40 people believe something strongly enough to make the ultimate decision to end their lives, I think we have to take it seriously enough to at least try to study it. And I think that it merits our serious consideration. But I also think that they spoke to much broader trends in the society and the culture around them. They believed that life of this planet was not as important as the afterlife. And in that regard, they actually line up with many other religious people who would say the same thing, who would say that what's more important is the afterlife and not what happens on this planet. Christian martyrs 2,000 years ago said the same thing, right? They said that, they'd rather go to their deaths and die at the young age of even teenagers or even children, and they'd rather have children die on this planet, but get a fortunate afterlife than live to a ripe old age. And that's where all that sort of martyrology comes from. Yeah. Even more than that, Heaven's Gate spoke to its moment. This was a group which was interested in sort of the end of the world and in the millennialism. They were right before the Y2K, so it was right before, there were all these groups that had these fears that the end of the world was coming. Heaven's Gate was also, members of Heaven's Gate were deep believers in conspiracies. They believed that there was a conspiracy of extraterrestrials that were running. There were both good extraterrestrials and bad extraterrestrials. There were the angelic beings they wanted to be, but there were also these demonic extraterrestrials as well. And they said the demonic ones were behind plots to control the world's governments and the world's banks. If you look at current affairs, as we're recording this, just a few weeks ago, or just last week, Donald Trump gave this big speech in Florida where he said that the banks were behind his fall in the polls, and there was a conspiracy. That's the same sort of language they believed in too. There was a conspiracy. The conspiracy was out to get them and out to get the few good people. And that in the case of Heaven's Gate, the conspiracy involved bankers, it involved the government, it involved the media, it involved these aliens, it involved the military, that everyone was lined up to get the few good people. And this they deeply believed in. And frankly, this has become pretty popular in the years since Heaven's Gate passed.